Yes.
Okay, so this year I decided to do a little something different and kind of bring out some of the little juicy tidbits I've learned over the years when it came to pitch competitions, and what judges that are and they may be investors, they may not be investors. A lot of times you never know. And some of the sessions that I had last week, I told them that you know you're going to have some investors there. Of course, you won't know who they are. We may not even know who they are. They're just normal, everyday people with extremely deep pockets. And I know for the last few years that they did have investors there as well as the judges. So what I want to do is give you guys a little more this time in the event that there is that one particular person out there that you may pique their interest somehow. So a few years ago, I really got into this and started talking to a lot of the investors in the angel networks, find out what they were looking for. I decided to change a lot of what I was doing. You can go online right now and you can get pitch decks, how to win an investor in 5 minutes, 10 slides, a bunch of different things. And none of them really work because what they're saying is put this in there, put this, put this, put this. And a lot of times that's from their perspective and not necessarily the investor or the judge's perspective. Everything that I'm going to tell you today is going to be a basic framework that's going to carry you from your idea, which is what you have right now, through your pitch, as well as the Q&A. If we do have time, I'm going to focus a lot on the Q&A because, believe it or not, that's where a lot of competition are won and lost, as well as investment dollars. So we are going to spend some time on that. But what I want to do is just give you guys kind of like a bunch of different little boxes. So after you finish with your client discovery, your interviews and things like that, you can start taking pieces of things that the judges are going to be looking for. Place those in those boxes, what we call our pitch. Okay. So this is behind the scenes. So we're going to go ahead and get started. Here's is what an investor's methodology is. Okay. Because a lot of people think it's like, well, I'm just going to wow them. No, this is what they look for. And this is my definition, but I'm going to go ahead and read it to you. When you have a product, service, or an idea that you have proven people want in a high growth market. A high growth market is a market that's normally growing on its own. For example, something like Uber or Waiter, the home delivery service. You have a business model that's highly scalable based on your research. We talked about research. You have determined a certain conversion rate based on a market sample and is profitable or shows financial promise. Remember, you do not have to be at the point where you're actually making money, but it does have to show some type of promise. Adding investment dollars will be like putting gas on the fire, creating huge profits based on an established conversion rate. This means that the growth will resemble that of a hockey curve. That's their so keep that in mind. That's their methodology. That's what they're looking for. So as you can see, it has nothing to do with how great this product or this service is. It's based on a lot of financials, but a certain methodology. And of course, here we go again. My favorite movie, which is Training Day. Why? Because remember, it's not what you know; it's what you can prove. So the good news is that the Bayou Biz Tech Challenge is focused on certain areas that are already high growth. The technology sector, energy sectors, health sectors, all of those are high growth. So a lot of that is already done for you. Now, some of the things that I will be covering in the Q&A and the things that I'm going to prepare you for when it comes to your customer discovery and your customer interviews is questions. There are certain questions that you will get. They ask them at every single pitch competition in Baton Rouge to Lower Lithuania. They're going to always ask them. And that one of those questions is, who is your competition? Now, if you were on the first webinar that I did, we talked about the customer discovery process. And one of the questions or one of the things that you wanted to find out in there is when you were trying to understand this problem, what are some of the products or services that they were using to fulfill that problem, and what are they? This is where you find that out. You can do your own research, to say, well, okay, well, my biggest competitor is this. But you see what I have highlighted at the very bottom? It said, Google is not your friend. When it comes to this, Google is not your friend. Your boots on the ground research is your friend. Because when it comes to Google, man, it's great. You can get a bunch of information, but you can prove anything on Google. You can go to Google and you can get enough documentation to prove to you that the earth is round. You can also get enough information to prove to you that the earth is flat. What they want to know is information based on what you have found out. Now, one of the things that I always encourage people to say, regardless of what your idea is, because this is the question that you will get, who's your competition? Never, ever say, I do not have any competition. Never say that. There's two types of competition. There's what you call direct competition. Direct competition would be like this. You have McDonald's and Burger King. They both sell hamburgers. They're in direct competition with each other. That's direct competition. Then you have what's called indirect competition. Indirect competition would be like McDonald's and Taco Bell. One sells hamburgers, the other sells tacos. But they both sell to the same audience. That's indirect competition. Find out who that is, because that's something you can eliminate a lot of questions by putting that in your pitch. Okay, we're going to talk about the actual body of it. We're going to talk about milestones and things like that. But these are some of the things that you want to take notes on based off of what your market sample is going to give you. Because remember, Google is not your friend. How are you different? Okay, now when they ask you that, because this is normally the next question, how are you different if you have direct? Oh, by the way, if for some reason you are fortunate enough not to have any competition at all, give it 18 months. That's just how fast, the entrepreneurial space when it comes to startup is. Okay, so how are you different? Now, to answer that question, how are you different? This is what you want to know. It's not that you want to sell a judge on why you're different. They have to be able to determine to say, well, yeah, they are different. They are different because of this. Being different is not because, well, I'm good looking, they're not. I have a college degree, they're not. They're talking about what's the difference in the product and how it affects the end user. That part has to be succinctly clear, distinctively clear. What is the differences? Okay? Is your solution validated? Have you validated your solution? And the way you validate your solution is this. We talked about a minimum viable product. Excuse me. We talked about a minimum viable product in the last session. That minimum viable product is validated in a lot of different ways along the process. First of all, if you did your sample and you have enough people that think that this is a great idea to where you can move forward, okay, that's a milestone. That's a milestone, and that's also a certain validation until you start making your tweaks. Remember, wash, rinse, repeat. Wash, rinse, repeat. Go to your market, find out what they think about it. They say, well, I think you need to change this, or I think you need to change that. Go back and change it. Don't try to sell them on it. Because the better you are at adapting your idea to your customer base, the easier it's going to be for you to sell. Always remember, Google is not a friend. It's not your friend. It's not what you know. It's what you can prove. Okay? So let's take a look at the pitch deck. Now, just by looking at this is the one thing that I can guarantee you. Compared to something like this, if I had to ask you just by you looking at that, if you're looking at the screen, there's a very good chance that you cannot go back and tell me what I said. Because just by looking at that, all of you said it's just too much. I say that because when I see a lot of pitch decks, they want to go real artsy with a lot of graphics and things like that, because your perceptions, I want to show them this, I want to wow them. When you put that much into your slide, that's what they're focused on. They're not paying attention to you. And you have missed a great opportunity to possibly relay your message. Compared to this is probably one of my all-time favorite shots in the startup community, in the pitch community, anytime I'm talking about pitch decks, because As you can see where the focus is compared to where it was before. Before, it was kind of like all over the place, and you weren't really listening to me. This is nice, clean, and all the attention is on that one individual, or maybe the Apple, but you see, there's not a lot going on here. If you guys don't know, this is the speech or his basic pitch, not necessarily to investors because Steve Jobs didn't need investors, but he pitched a new device called an iPhone to the general public. That phone sold, I think when it first came out, for like $800. Of course, we all think it's like, who's going to pay that kind of money for that kind of phone? Nobody pays that kind of money for a phone, right? We don't do it today. They didn't do it then. But this is what he said. He walks out on stage and he said, I am going to change the way that we communicate. When he said that, you could hear a pin drop. All of the focus was on him. When it comes to using PowerPoint, only display things. Now we're getting to the point where we're going to start, getting into the meat and potatoes to really get the judges on your side, to really grab their attention and to really keep it. Okay. The one thing that I always get people say, well, I want to show them this. I want to show them this. And they put too much on the slide. They put way too much on there. And I asked them, I said, well, why do you have so much on the slide? They said, well, I won't have time in my speech to read it to them or to tell them. And I think to myself, if you don't have time to say it because, we hear faster than we read. I said, well, if you don't have the time to say it, what makes you think they're going to have the time to read it? Only put things on your slide that you want them to remember. Just a little housekeeping note, because people always do this, but you're going to have to practice. Make sure you find out where the center is for your PowerPoint. I see people all the time, they get stuck and they get flustered by pointing the clicker at the screen. That's not going to do you any good. Find out where the center is. The center is normally in front of you somewhere, normally right in the middle of the stage, or it's either that or on the podium, wherever the setup is. Okay, find out where that is. If you're going to make a checkpoint for this competition, find out where it is. It's going to either be right in front of you or it's going to be on the podium itself. But make sure that you're standing close enough to it. Normally they have it's a pretty big range, normally 50 feet, you're okay. But don't fluster yourself. Know where your center is so you can move fluently and confidently. Do not use any animations or transitions in your slide. Here's why. A lot of times, especially I know with this competition, they'll ask you to send your PowerPoint, and they'll just make one big long one. Okay, and I've seen this happen too many times. There's different versions and there's difference of software from the one that you're going to use at home to do this or in the library compared to the actual software that they're going to use. A lot of times, way too many times, the software is not compatible. So take any fancy animations with the slides flying off and stuff like that, take that out. Meaning that if it's gonna take you adding a few more slides to control it or to do whatever it is that you want to do that. But don't do the animation of the slide, because once you submit it, that can cause problems. And you may not know it until you actually get there. Okay? Never put financials on a slide. I know this is kind of early in the process and a lot of you guys may not have them, but when it comes to projections and things like that, one of the things that I did last year, and I'll probably do it again this year, is when I looked at everyone's business plan, I had added an additional section on the feedback, and it was basically any red flags that you can potentially get yourself into. The majority of those was in the actual financials because it didn't make sense. That's not a good, once you're in the Q&A session, that's not good questions to have. You have good questions, I'm going to tell you what those are, and then you have bad questions, okay? A bad question is if you just imagine a flat line. A good question is going to be below the line. A bad question, at best, you can get back to that level line to be equal. So you want to stay out of that danger zone by putting finance, because If you catch the wrong person there, and what I mean, I'm gonna teach you how to research judges, but if it's the wrong person and they start digging right there, that's not gonna make you look good. We're gonna stay above board on this one, okay? Now, I'm not saying we're not gonna put any financials at all. I'm not saying that. But when you see that slide with just a bunch of numbers on it, I guarantee you they're gonna come back to that. And that's one thing that you don't want them to do, okay? Now, no less than 24 points. We're not trying to give the people in the back of the room an eye test. So make sure that it's no less than that. Rule of 5, no more than 5 words per line, no more than 5 lines per slide. Okay, now, if you go back to the slide that I showed with all of the multicolors and things like that, okay, that can cause you to split your audience. So let me tell you what that means. People in general are either auditory or visual when it comes to a setting like this. Now, they can probably see you and hear you, but it's like a round hole with these 2 pegs. They'll both go in, but one has to go in slightly before the other. If you show a slide with a lot of words or a lot of multicolors, they're going to hone into that. You may be talking about something else and they're not paying attention to you. So if that person's visual, he's not going to be paying attention to what you said. If you just mention it and then go to something else and he was focused on all of those colors, he can disengage from you. Okay, that's why you don't want to use a lot of different colors or a lot of a slide that is chock full of words, numbers, and things like that, because some people are going to be focused on that. Other people are going to be focused on what you're saying. Remember, you want to keep everybody on the same boat. You want to keep everybody on this journey with you. And how do you do that? You make sure that anything that you have on the slide is congruent with what you're saying. If you are going to use pictures, make sure that you use the best graphics and the best pictures that you can find, okay? This is why you want to use images if you do, okay? Images causes a lot of different things to happen. Most importantly, it enhances the long-term memory and it causes people to act. One of the things that in a longer pitch, if a company, for example, is going to be pitching to some investors, I go into storytelling with them, how to tell a story, to really put the investors in a certain situation. In a pitch competition, you don't have that kind of time. However, you can get the exact same emotion by showing someone a picture instead of telling a long story. You know, there's a saying that, you know, a picture is worth 1,000 words. I totally agree with that. So the one thing that I always say is, if a picture is worth 1,000 words, why are you using 1,000 words instead of a picture? Okay. Now, let's talk about pitch structure. Okay. When it comes to this, you have to be really structured. Okay. There's a certain there's a certain flow that they like to see. Okay. When it comes to telling a story, and the reason I'm talking about telling a story is the one thing that I see a lot of times is they like to see the problem addressed first and then the solution. So what I see is people will say, well, you know, according to blah, 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 this is a problem, or because of blah, 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 this is a problem. Okay. When you're talking about a problem, you have to tell a story that puts your audience and the judges in that story. Okay, let's just say, for example, if your product or your solution was the life buoys, life rafts, the little life buoys that they throw if you're drowning. Okay, instead of saying, you know, according to the maritime law, you know, 15% of people die because of this. Tell a story that puts us in a boat, and that boat is sinking. Now we're in that water. What can save our life? What is our solution? That life vessel, that life ring. That's what I mean. Make sure that you use the word, I call it you focus, meaning you use the word you a lot, which means you're including them, but you're putting them in a certain situation to where they need your solution. Okay? And you want to talk their language because they're judging you on the process. Remember, it's not what you know, it's what you can prove. So remember we talked about that. Tell it in the present tense if you possibly.
Joelle, are you there? Joelle, I've lost the audio on you. Joelle? Hang tight, guys. Let's find out what happened to his audio. Hang on. Hang on, hang on. All right. Let's find out where Joelle is. Joelle, I've lost your audio. There. Joelle, is that you? Hello?
Hello,
Hello, is that Joelle?
that's me.
Hey, we lost your audio.
Okay, where did you lose me?
Whew.
Oof.
Ugh. We were on the pitch structure and it dropped off. There we
Right
go.
here. Was I on this screen?
Yes, on the screen. Correct.
Okay, on this screen. Okay, so I'll go ahead and start again from right here. Remember we talked about being you focused in your story when you're introducing a problem. Instead of telling it to the judges, put them in it as if we were in a boat. Let's just say if your product or your solution was the ring buoys, okay, the little floatable things or life vests or whatever that is. Don't just talk about, 15% of people die because they don't have, a life vest or whatever. Put us in that sinking boat. Put us in the scenario. Our boat is sinking. And your product, your viable product, is the solution to our problem at that moment. That's how you address the pain. Okay, because the result of what? We're gonna die unless your product is there. Tell them what you do, not how you do it. A lot of times I see people, and we had this, which was big. I think it was last year, where a lot of our teams had developed apps, and they spent the majority of their pitch talking about how the app worked versus what the app actually did. They're not concerned about that, how it actually works, where you spend the entire time talking about it. Tell us what you do, not how you do it. That's it. Okay? Okay. Man, I'm having all kind of problems over here. Did you share the screen back with me? Hello?
Yes, I see the screen that says pitch structure, problem result, and solution.
Okay, I'm trying to advance it. Did you share the screen back with me?
Nope. I mean, I never took it back from you.
Okay. Okay, here we go.
There we go.
Okay, here we go.
So I see talk their language.
Okay, right, here we go. Okay, now, before when I talked about talk that language, this is why. When they're judging you, remember we talked about the process. They want to make sure that you actually understand the process. So the better you are at talking their language, the better your chances of either getting funded or scoring really, really high when it comes to the pitch process. And I mentioned this to, I'm not sure which team it was I was talking to last week, but what you're really selling them on is you and the process, not the product. Because, the example that I always give is like a horse race. They're betting on the jockey. They're not betting on the horse. Because if it is an investor, they're not going to be totally sold on the idea. They want to be sold on you. They want to be sold that you are going to make this work. Okay, that's what they're betting on. They're betting on the process and they're betting on you, not the product. Now, when it comes to your pitch, here's one of these little boxes that we talked about. Doing your customer discovery and your client interviews, there's certain things that we wanted to find out. Okay, so think about the things that you've learned. And I always have to say this, it does not always have to be, we had all of this success and everything is just the way we wanted. No, not at all. If you were able to learn something from that, making a pivot, what we call it, and I'll go over that a little later, that's a good thing. Anything that you have come across, discovered to move this idea forward, any patents you have filed, How did you become unique? What was it that you found out that made you unique? And what are some of the highlights of the customer discovery? What are some of the things that the customer said? Judges, as well as investors, they love to hear these personal stories of conversations that you actually had with your audience. What did they say about it? And earlier I talked about pivot points. The one thing that I said in the very beginning, when you write down your hypothesis or your idea, exactly how you think it's going to work, and then you write down the problem that it solves, exactly how you think it's going to work, it never works that way. It never does. I don't know of any, but very few actually, you don't have to make any changes. There's normally changes. If you do your customer discovery and your client interviews, and it's what's determined based on a lot of the data that you have, that maybe you should do this. That's something that you learn. They like to hear that kind of stuff because that tells them that you are following a system, and you're following some type of method. Okay, that's basically proof that you've done the work, all of that work. So that's what I mean by making sure that you talk their language. That's what they want to talk about. They want to talk about the process. As I said, it's not about how you do it. Is or I should say, when we talk about the product itself, explain what it does, not how it works. Okay, this is the stuff that they want to talk about. Now, this right here is very important. Pitch from where you are. And what that means is you don't have to have, done the whole process. Okay? Don't start making up stuff. Wherever you are in the process, that's where you pitch from. I don't think I've talked to anybody that has the exact same type of idea, which means you're following the exact same type of model. I've talked to different teams that had a wide variety, which means that you're going to be at different points in the process by the time the pitch competition comes. Pitch on what you've done. The best, or I should say, the people that win the most understand that they don't start speculating, because when you speculate and say, well, if we do this or if we do that, you're setting yourself up for some bad questions in the end. Okay? You're setting yourself up for some bad questions. Now, remember, this is just me and what I train. So the one thing that I always say is, learn where you are in this process. Okay? So the top prize for the Bayou BizTech Challenge is $10,000. Okay? Where is that $10,000 going to get you? What is it? At what level? What is going to move you to? What is the next phase of your business? And be able to articulate that. Another example I give is, if you go ask your mom or your dad, your parents right now, and say, hey, mom, dad, I need $50,000. What is the logical question that they're going to ask you? Other than, what's the matter? Are you crazy? The logical question that they're going to ask you is probably, what do you need it for, or what for? When you ask them, or when you get to your pitch, and you're asking for money, or I'm not sure if that's going to be an actual part of it or not, but you want to be able to articulate what those funds are going to be used for, how that's going to get you to the next level. They want to know that. Another thing that I always suggest, remember, this is me and what I use for any of my clients that's going to be pitching at a contest. Never pitch for more than what the grand prize is. Within the last 2 years, I've had 4 winners to where they were pitching against someone who was already post revenue. They were already making a lot of money, but they asked for more money than what the actual grand prize was. Now, these were legitimate businesses, but here's the thing. This is what these weren't investors. It was just a pitch competition. Now, here we go behind the scenes. I've also judged enough to know this, and this is why I say you have to be specific for both of you. Make it really, really hard on the judges, and this is why I'm telling you this, because I think this is going to be the best pitch competition that we've had so far. When they're deliberating in there, it's not close ballot. They've watched all of their team, basically. They've watched everybody pitch. They've answered questions, and they go from whether they are, regardless of what they do, they go to the point of understanding that, hey, we're about to give this money to somebody. It doesn't come out Okay, so they do want to have this feel-good moment. Because they want to have that feel-good moment, this is the question that they always ask. Let's just say if it comes down to there's a couple of teams that are really, really close. This is the determining factor, this question here. What team can benefit from this money the most? Who is this $10,000 going to help the most? Which means if they ask you what you're going to do with the money, you don't tell them you're going to go to a trip to Bermuda because you just X yourself out of the game. Have a really, really good story of how that $10,000 is going to take you to the next level. Now, to go back to the most recent one, which was only like a year and a half ago, where I had someone pitching against someone that was post revenue, they was asking for $250,000. The prize was only $15,000. Okay, so I had them articulate how that $15,000 was going to get them to that next level, and they won because that's the question. They want to be of good. They want to benefit the startup community by making sure that that money is used wisely. Okay, so even if you are going to go to Bermuda, don't tell them. Never tell them that. Now, practice, 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 practice. This is if you're not comfortable on stage, you're going to have to practice. So what I want to go over a couple of things when it comes to that. Practice with your pitch deck. Okay, if you practice with your pitch deck, then you'll understand that the center that I talked about earlier is not on the screen. It's going to be somewhere in front of you. So you always want to keep that. You always want to keep that, in front of you, that, and keep that in front of your mind, that, because I see so many people that start clicking, and then they get flustered because it's not advancing. And I want to yell out to them, it's right in front of you, but I don't. Use a live audience. Do not use a mirror. As a professional speaker, I can tell you that will do more harm than good, because when you speak in front of a mirror, you're only looking at yourself. You're only looking at your eyeballs. And you get a false sense of confidence. Now you're looking at 300, 400 sets of eyeballs. It's going to freak you out. So get in the habit of practicing in front of a live audience. Practice in front of each other. Practice in front of your schoolmates when you go home. Practice, practice, practice. Get to the point to where you don't use any notes. And don't look at the slides. You shouldn't have that much on the slides that you can actually read anyway. Remember, we talked about that. The slide, that's not your teleprompter. Please do not use it as a teleprompter. It's only to show the judges things that you want them to be able to make a decision on after everything is said and done. Okay, now, I do want to leave some time for the Q&A, so I'm going to go through this really quick, but this is extremely, extremely important when it comes to the Q&A. There's certain things, this has been my secret sauce when it comes to me and my clients when they pitch competition. It's always been in the Q&A. Why has it always been in the Q&A? Because people will practice their pitch, but they don't know how to prepare for the Q&A. And that's how I normally get them. Okay, here we go. Now, the one thing I do want you to understand is, first of all, no, Wendy, my screen did not just black out. I don't have any problems over there. What you see is a black screen. Now, if you're on a laptop, I think it's Control B. If you hit Control B, the screen will go black. But what I normally do is I'll just put a black slide there. Here's why. Let me explain to you the judging process. Okay, Wendy may not like this because I'm telling all the good stuff. I'm telling all the secrets. Now, when it comes to judging, most of the time you're going to have between 4, 5 at the most judges because of time. They're going to be under a time constraint just like you are. Okay, now remember, we didn't go deep into the pitch as far as trying to root out anything. We didn't want to give them anything to start digging on. If we don't give them anything to start digging on, they're going to basically ask us a generic question, which we're going to prepare for. Remember, there's good questions and there's not so good questions. We want to stay away from the not so good questions. Okay, now this is what I teach. When you finish your presentation, if you can, I always go to a black screen because I want them to question me. They may be taking no question. They don't have all day, so they only have the opportunity to ask you one question. They don't get the opportunity to dig. So the questions that they ask you, you want that to come from their memory or from their notes, not something that they saw. So what I tell my client to do is go to a black screen, put that clicker down, and talk to me. If you keep that in your hand, they're gonna and they start asking you to go back to this slide, especially if you have financials on there. That's not good questions. Those are not good questions to have because at best you can come back to being level or anything like this. The main speaker, I know some people have talked about trying a lot of different speakers where we all want to take turns. Remember, this is not a show. We want somebody to quarterback this thing. So whoever the main speaker is, that's who's going to quarterback this. And you're going to start with the first question. You'll probably take that one. Okay. You're gonna quarterback the Q&A session. Departmentalize who's going to answer what. They may ask a marketing question. They may ask a tech design question. Who's the best person to answer that? Determine that based on your team right now. Determine who's going to answer what type of questions. You're going to put your pitch together and just think about it every single slide that you go through. What area is that really hitting on? Do I have anything in my pitch about marketing? Do I have a lot about customer discovery? Well, who did the customer discovery? Okay, make sure that person is prepared for it. Answer that question. Don't beat around the bush or give them a lot of fluff. Okay, if you can't answer that question in say no more than say 20 seconds or 30 seconds, you don't really know it. You don't know the answer. David Rose is his name. He's been an angel investor. He's one of the founders of the New York Angel Investor, which is like the biggest angel investor group in the country. That's what he always says. He said, if you can't answer that question in 20 seconds, he said, you don't know your product good enough. Okay? Know where the weak areas are in your business plan, in your pitch. Know beforehand. Weak areas means there are things that may be underdeveloped, not because you haven't gotten there yet. Okay, that's not a bad thing. If they ask you a question that you haven't gotten to yet, simply tell them I hadn't gotten there yet. Okay, be able to explain it. That's not a bad question. Those are not bad questions. Okay, they're not. So don't think of that as a bad question. Okay, if there are any numbers as a team, know this, study this like you studied preparing for a final exam. Because when we get into, and see, everybody's already practiced their pitch. They practice, they got great pitch decks. Everybody does. At this point, see, this is where teams start to separate and identify themselves in the Q&A process. So you want to make sure that you look confident and you sound confident. So when they start asking you questions, if there's somebody, when I say quarterback it, that doesn't mean you have to answer everything. That just means you lead the session. That's all that means. You lead the session. If they ask a technical question and you're not that technical guy, hey, hand it to them. Hand it off to someone else and let them go ahead and answer. Because this person is more knowledgeable in that field, if it's a more specific question, then that's in their expertise. That's who you want answering that question. If the question goes, if you answer that question, which you should, pointedly, directly to the point, give them the meat and potatoes, not the salad and all the other stuff. Give them what they're asking for. And if they ask you or pass it on to a different judge and they ask you a question on a different topic, you pass it on to someone else. Okay? When you answer that question and you know you've answered that question, shut up. Don't let the silence bother you if you've answered that question. Because remember, they only have one question. They only have one. Take your time, answer that question completely, and shut up. I had something almost blow up in and the only reason I'm saying that is because I was in an investor meeting 2 years ago with a guy that was my client in a pitch competition, was getting ready to pitch to some investors. And we went through the whole process. And the one thing that I had worked with him, but he brought some other members of his team. He brought engineers, and it was an oil field company. He brought engineers and a bunch of other people who I had not met. Now, with the investor, the Q&A session is not like, each person gets one question. No, they can question you as long as they want. So this was like a half an hour. And he was doing brilliant, absolutely brilliant, until they asked him a question that could have been answered best by his engineer. So what he did was he passed it off to the engineer, okay, who I did not know. And the engineer answered a question beautifully. There was silence. And then the engineer started talking again. And he said something that caused not only me and the investors to freeze. And I was like, oh my God, how did you possibly say that? You know, but he only did that because I guess it was because of the silence, or he thought he was adding more to it. When he asked, he almost blew the deal. He almost blew it. So as a team, when they ask you a question, don't feel that you have to elaborate because they're sitting down thinking or they're writing or something like that. Be okay with that. If they don't ask you to follow up with it, or they don't ask you any more questions or ask you to elaborate on it, do not give them any more, because you can actually turn that into a situation where the following judge can ask you, he can hop on that and start digging and digging. Those are not good. Definitely not great. Remember we talked about the black screen? Never go back. Of course, if they ask you to, they will. You do it if they ask you to. However, what I found worked is when you go to that black screen and you put that remote down for them, they're done with it. These are not the investors, they're judges. And most of the time, they already have a question. They already have a question that they want to ask. Some of them may not ask questions. Okay? Research the judges if you can. And this is really, really simple. Chances are they're going to have them posted on the website or something like that. If not, when you get to that event, talk to them. Talk to them. Hi, my name is such and such. I'm a student at wherever. Okay? Get to know them. Okay. Now, let's talk about the questions. Okay? Now, remember, I've always been talking about good questions and bad questions. Okay, let me tell you where the bad questions come from. Bad questions come from two places. Bad questions come from anything that's unclear or anything that's unbelievable. If you put up a slide with just a bunch of numbers, because they're going to always hop back to that. If it's too much, or if there's something that they may see that it may clear, it didn't make sense, chances are you're going to get that as a question. So even if you just clarify it for them, if zero is a medium, you got negative and you got positive. Just because they ask you to clear that up for them, that brings you back to zero. That's not necessarily a plus. You want to be able to give them answers that you can knock out of the park, to where they can say, "Wow, this team really knows their stuff." So understand that bad questions come from two places. Number one, anything that's unclear or anything that's unbelievable. Okay? Now, I thought about this. I didn't know if I actually wanted to do it or not, but I'm just gonna go ahead and put it out there. If you want to delete it, you can. But one of the biggest things that I do to win pitch competitions, I've learned how to what's called beta judge. And what I mean by beta judge is I've been able to successfully get judges to ask certain questions that I know we have really, really good answers for, and we're just going to knock this humdinger out of the park. They're not going to even see it coming, and they don't. Okay, understanding where those questions come from. I'll give you an example. This was last year. There was a competition, and we're looking at there was a lot of things based on the judges. I had already researched the judges, and I said, okay, we got to take this out. This guy is an expert at this, and if we just kind of throw him, say we're going to do this, he's going to drill us on it. Take that out. There was a lot of things that we took out based on this particular competition. But in just doing that, I met with him like 3 or 4 times, just listening to the story. There were some numbers that, and of course, I always said, don't, and I'm gonna tell you right, don't, if you cannot back this up, do not try this. That's why I said you may want to just forget this, but I'm going to tell you anyway. We were in a situation to where there was a national success rate that was proven, documented at 30%. My client had a success rate of 95%. I said, stop. I said, okay, can you prove this? How did you come up with this figure? How did this come about? How long? So after a very, very, very long conversation about that figure, based on the national average, and I looked it up, I researched, I saw what the national average was. I said, okay, what we have to do is be able to prove this, because I'm going to use this as bait, just like fishing. So I went back the next day after we'd done the research. She got me all the documentation that I wanted. So this is what I did in the pitch. I said, on one slide, do not put anything on it, nothing whatsoever, except when you get to this part in your pitch, I want you to put the national average and I want you to put your average and just go on, just leave it, just like that. I said, I promise you, it's just like a worm dangling into a fish. And the very first judge went back to that and she explained it to them and they were so impressed. But she knew that was coming because that was intentionally planned. But I will say this, word of caution, do not let that backfire on you. If you cannot prove it, remember, Google is not your friend. This is based on the legwork that you've done, the milestones, things of that nature that are really, really good, that are outstanding, tremendously outstanding, and we have a great story for it. We can utilize that. We can utilize that to start knocking these answers out of the park. Remember, 0, minus, and plus. So by us using that, I guess that judge wanted to, why? Because the two things, unclear, unbelievable. It was unbelievable to him. But we had an answer prepared for it. That was an easy plus. Okay, so we talked about bad questions, where they're going to come from. They're going to come from things that are unclear or things that are unbelievable. Here's a question that you're going to get. Remember, we talked about them earlier. We talked about the customer. They're going to ask, if you're on this call right now, somebody, and you're standing up there in November for the Bayou BizTech Challenge, one of your questions will be, tell me about your customer. Who's your customer? They're going to ask you that. Okay. Now, this is what I mean by this. This question can either be, this is not a bad question. This is just a question that you're going to get. What I want you to do is prepare a really good answer for that. A really good answer for that. The best answer to answer that question is if you can tell them, based on our research or based on our client discovery, we have determined that our customer is this person. Versus saying our research, meaning that you went to Google again. You don't want that. You want to be able to have that conversation with them based off of the customer discovery and the client interview process that you personally went through. You will get this question. Tell me about your customer. Who's your customer? Okay. Here's another one that you're going to get, because I'm going to close on them. The other two questions that you're going to get, we talked about earlier, but I want to reiterate them. So we talked about good questions. We talked about bad questions. These are questions that you can knock out of the park. Okay. Tell me who your customer is. We already talked about that one. Okay. The next one is, what makes you different? If you're on this call, you're going to get those questions. Make sure that you have really good answers prepared for those. If you go back and listen to this and you remember those little boxes and you start picking things from your client interviews, your customer discovery process, along with just making sure you tell a really, really good story, and you pay attention not to draw anything that's unclear or anything that they don't believe, especially if weak areas are not bad. Keep that in mind. When I say weak areas, if you don't necessarily have expertise in it, that's not bad. Just be prepared for it. Be prepared to explain weak areas. They may ask you a question that, you may not know anything about. That's not a bad thing. That's not a bad thing at all. You just haven't gotten that far yet. Okay. Plus, remember the questions that we did go over. Make sure you have really good answers for them, and we'll make this the best pitch competition ever. Okay, Wendy, back to you.
Well, thanks so much, Joelle. I appreciate that. So we had a few questions come in the chat box, and so we have a question about the financial aspect.
Yep.
About let's see, let me scroll back a little bit. It says the question about not showing financials, or perhaps it's too Too soon to show them? Perhaps you could go over that a little bit more.
Okay. Let's just take something for example. First of all, it's pre-revenue. I don't know exactly which business, which team it is, but I'm going to use a scenario. Let's say this is pre-revenue. Okay, which means that you haven't made any sales yet. You have remember the investment methodology. The investment methodology. The one thing that I said was when it comes to pitching to investors or just pitching in general, there have to be certain things established. Okay, if you talk to say 100 people, okay, you first of all, in order for you to have project any type of financial, you have had to have proved that your idea works. Okay, it can't be hypothetical. If it's hypothetical and it's not proven, for example, if you say, well, we anticipate that we're going to spend 5,000 on marketing. Okay, I'm just using this as an example. I don't know exactly what example they were talking about, but in a financial, I'm saying 5,000 on marketing. Okay, if I go back to, which is the reason I had this lady take this out a few years ago, one of the judges had an advertising company, advertising and marketing, which was passed on from his father. So he had been in that business for 25 years. If she would have asked that question and it was speculated or not proven meaning given a specific conversion rate, meaning if I spend $5,000, I will be able to sell X amount of goods. If this is speculation, all they have to say is, well, how do you know? They're not. You want to make sure that has some type of traction to it when it comes to it. As I said before, if you're talking about, I would really like to know more about when you said financial, because when you say financial, I'm thinking about a big screen full of numbers, and I'm trying to pull a scenario out to explain it. Is there any way that person can be more specific?
Well, what he wrote specifically was, it sounds like he's saying not to show them because someone might question them. I don't see why that's a problem if the financials are accurate.
Okay. In order for it to be accurate, that has to be proven. If it is proven, you can show it. But at the same time, if you're looking at Q&A, question and answer, okay, you have financials. They are proven. Okay. How is that? How can that? If you're post revenue, which means that you have money coming in, yes, that can be a good thing. That can be a good thing. Telling how you're gonna spend the money. Is that what it is? Is that what he's talking about when you say financials? Because I'm looking at financials because I've seen like balance sheets and things of that nature, and when the judges start asking a question about it, it's like there's no basis for it. It's just like somebody took a calculator and just started adding and subtracting.
Right. So you would say that financials that are backed up by strong assumptions are good, where if you've got a strong answer back for the judges
Right.
as to why those figures are what they are, then those are good. It's the ones that are, I'm going to make $5 million my first month of business, and I'm going to be a billionaire by the time that within a year.
Exactly.
That's not what you want to show. Okay.
Right. And actually, I did a right as a tech park. Actually, I did a workshop year before last about that, where guys like, well, how much sales do you have? $12. But by the end of the year, it's going to be $1 million. No, it's not.
Right. Because the evidence is pointing to otherwise. So it's about the strong evidence. And a colleague of mine, Todd Lowry, who works with the investment readiness program, he says that investors will want to know entrepreneurs have done their research. So it's those strong assumptions. Yes. Wonderful. Any other questions, guys? Let's see, any other questions? Oh, we did have a question that said, is the audience for the presentations potential venture capitalists? So not venture capitalists. That is much, much further along the investment pathway. This would be basically a seed investment. $10,000 is a seed investment. And as Joelle said, it's for the potential amount that is available. Venture capitalists, they deal in the millions of dollars. So I would say it is for this particular audience of being an investor that can actually put in, you know, a few $1,000s, $10,000 being the prize. So that is your audience for the pitch, because that is what you're seeking, is just as Mr. Dawson said. Any other questions? All right. Well, thank you, Joelle, so much. This was
You're welcome.
as always. I like your good questions and bad questions. A bad question being the unclear or unbelievable. That's excellent advice. So for the rest of you, please do take a look at the judging criteria. You can find it on the BizTech Challenge website under judging criteria. And there's also some other resources that are there. I've put a website here for you to go and look at the executive summary template and other templates that can help you with your final pitch presentation. So please do reach out to us if you have any further questions. And I know Joelle is available for each of you to help craft a pitch so he can spend an hour with you. So that is something that you're welcome to take advantage of, because we want each one of you guys to have the best possible pitches for the final BizTech Challenge judging. Any other comments or questions, Joelle?
Nope, that's it.
Wonderful. Well, I appreciate your time today, and thank you, all of you, for tuning in with us today. And please check the webinar schedule for our next upcoming webinars. Thank you very much, and have a great day, everyone.